We are live.
Right. Good evening, friends and senior members of the profession. I have great pleasure in welcoming you. I am Maheshwaran, a nominated member of the SARC committee. I am thankful to the SARC and Chairman J. Chalapati for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. As you know, we are having a discussion on the exposure draft of audit quality maturity model version 1, shortly known as AQMM. No, it's a recent development, and it follows a lot of emphasis on auditing standards. Though initially it is recommended for listed entities and banks and all, as you could see in the institute paper, it says for and the objective of this is to evaluate for an evaluation matrix for the sole proprietors and audit firms. So maybe in another couple of years it will touch each and everyone. So which shows already about 150 participants, and it's likely to exceed the 300, which shows the interest in the subject. I have great pleasure in introducing today's experienced speaker, CA Mohan R. Levy. Qualified as a chartered accountant in 1989, he has over 25 years of experience in industry across a variety of industries. He has worked in senior position in finance, in manufacturing and software companies. Mr. Mohan also has over 6 years of experience in practice. At present, he is a partner with Messrs. KP Rao & Co, Chartered Accountants, Bangalore, and heads the Ind AS and GST practices of the firm. Mr. Mohan is the author of books on IFRS, Ind AS, key auditor matters, and other related topics. Mohan has spoken at various conferences in India and abroad on accounting standards, IFRS, Sarbanes-Oxley, and GST, and is a faculty member with the Institute for their IFRS certification course and registered valuer programs. His articles appear frequently in the Hindu Business Line, Deccan Herald, and the Bombay Chartered Accountant Journal. With these few words, I have great pleasure in introducing today's speaker, CA Mohan R. Levy. Please, it's on for you, sir. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Maheshwaran sir. Thank you very much for that introduction. So, okay. So, welcome to all the participants. Let me thank SARC for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you all on this awareness program on audit quality maturity model, which is also shortly called as AQMM, as Maheshwaran sir was saying. Luckily, this is not a very technical discussion. It's only an awareness program. So my job is pretty easy, just to make you all aware of what the contents of this AQMM are. And as Maheshwaran sir was rightly saying, though we may feel that this is initially not going to touch the small and medium practitioners, if we see what has been happening in in the other legislations, it's not going to be long before even the small and medium enterprises would come under this particular category. That is the first thing which I wanted to sort of tell you all. Secondly, and probably more importantly also, I think as a measure of self-governance, shall I say, it is better that we focus a little bit more on audit quality itself, irrespective of whether there's an AQMM model or not, because there are a lot of questions here for which, and a lot of suggestions also, if I may use the word, which we can actually use even in our current practice, whether there is going to be an AQMM model or not. So I think this is a very appropriate time to sort of get into this mode of trying to improve our audit quality. So I'll take you through the presentation for about a couple of hours. It may probably take a maximum of 2 hours, and then we will look at a few questions which any of you all may have, and then we will sort of see what can be done for this. The ICAI itself has said that this is a capacity building measure to self-evaluate the current levels of maturity and to improve on competencies that are good or lacking. Good means you want to make it better. Lacking means you want to make it good. That is the overall tone of this AQMM. Now, later on, I'll take you through a few of the nitty-gritties to why, as to specific areas in which they are trying to sort of, ask us to improve our competencies. But the overall tone of this AQMM is very clearly with a suggestion that audit quality has to be improved. You just cannot say that I have done a good audit and my audit documentation is perfect. We have seen in many cases, not only in India, but all over the world also, that howsoever big an audit firm or howsoever reputed the company, shortcomings have been noticed in the audit or the work done by the auditor. So the idea behind this is to think of this as a journey. Think of this audit quality as a journey. It is not a destination. You will have to keep on improving every single year. New regulations may come in, new standards may come in, new restrictions may come in, code of ethics may say something else. So you should, the idea behind today's session, which is organized by the SIRC, is to make you all aware and probably commence this journey. There is no time limit for you to complete this journey, so you can keep on improving. That's the overall tone behind this particular AQMM model, because it's very clear that and I should also tell the participants, please don't think of this as a criticism. I mean, whatever the AQMM is trying to say, many of the things which are there, the contents are already there with us. So many of the suggestions given by them, we are already following to a large extent. It's just that incremental improvement which we have to do. So that is why this discussion is taking place today. So it's not a criticism, it's not pointing fingers at audit firms, it's nothing of that sort. It is just a document to tell you all that keep on at this job of trying to improve on your audit quality. Globally, the work being done by auditors is being looked at very, very closely. I think this is something which all of you all would have already observed and seen in the news reports, papers, WhatsApp group messages everywhere. You can be very sure that I'm not going to name specific companies. It's not about ILFS, it's not about DFHL, it's not about Wirecard, it's not about any of these companies. Generally, all across the globe, there seems to be a requirement, shall I say, or there seems to be a feeling that somehow auditors should be able to prevent a majority of these accounting issues to sort of, be prevented. It's not about fraud detection as such. That is a very clear thing that auditors are not there to detect fraud, but generally a lot of the audit report is not giving exact picture of the of what has been done. A lot of these discussions are happening. I will just give you all one example which will sort of make this point a little bit more clear. There was a group of building contractors in the UK, shall I say, okay, building, let us say, building real estate company, let me say. Real estate company in the in the UK, sorry. And they had auditors who were there for a very long time. The name of the group is Carilion, Carilion. The auditors were there for a very long time. And they had a typical cash flow issue, just like what we had in ILFS also. Within a year, they sort of had to apply for bankruptcy, and now they are a bankrupt company. They've gone into liquidation and all those things. So obviously, after this happened, everybody woke up and they all said, "Oh, you know what? Auditors have not done their job properly. They did not tell us about this and all those things." So one of the very significant points which was made by the legislature, UK government legislators, group of ministers, when they heard this Carilion case, they said that we are not asking you to detect the fraud. We are not asking you to tell that this company will close down. We are not asking you to tell that they would have probably had some issues of fraud or whatever it may be. The only point he tried to make was that you've been the auditor of this company for 15 years. In your audit report or whatever the notes and accounts, whatever is there, there is not even a single paragraph or a single sentence saying that this company could have a cash flow issue. It could be key audit matters, it could be anywhere. It's just not there anywhere. So that's why I'm saying that the work done by auditors is being looked at very, very closely. You can take the similar example in India also. And all of you would have probably seen the NAFRA report on ILFS. So that also is a similar thing only.
Sir, 1 minute. Selva here. Sir, is PPT running or else is it in blank?
Sorry?
PPT, is it running or else you're just explaining some? Because I can see the blank screen only.
PPT வரலையா?
இல்ல sir, PPT வந்து blank இருக்கு. I can see the screen sharing part, but ஆனா white screen தான் தெரியுது. Can you share that?
ஒரே ஒரு நிமிஷம். அதான் what we have to see here.
Yeah, now the slideshow போடுங்க.
இப்போ வருதா?
ஒரு நிமிஷம் sir.
வரலையா?
இல்ல PPT தெரியுது, but not in a slideshow mode. Now it's in a normal mode. பரவாயில்ல, இப்படியே போடலாம்.
மூவ் ஆயிட்டு இருக்குல்ல?
இப்போ வந்து அவேர்னஸ் பேஜ்ல இருக்கு ப்ரோக்ராம், அந்த நார்மல் மோட் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பேஜ்
full மோட்ல இருக்கு சார். அது இந்த ஸ்கிரீன் மட்டும் கொஞ்சம்.
Yeah, it's running through sir. Now it's running through. You just put it in first.
So I think we'll keep it in this mode only. பரவாயில்லை உங்களுக்கு?
பரவாயில்ல சார். PPT then circulate பண்ணிக்கலாம். first slide and okay. Okay, நீங்க run through பண்ணிட்டீங்களா? No problem sir. Can keep it in this mode.
மூவ் ஆயிட்டு இருக்குல்ல?
slide show but slide show இல்ல, நார்மல் மோட்ல இருக்கு. No problem.
நார்மல் மோட்ல இருக்கு சார். Yeah, please sir, please carry on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you look at the USA, they have got this also in the US, but I'm not going to talk too much about the US because we had maximum problem. But just look at the main, everybody all over the world, people are looking at this work being done by the auditors, as I said, right? You look at India, what has happened? What do we have now? We have a peer review board. Many of the participants in this session would have had a peer review done. We have something called as FRRP, which is again giving a lot of suggestions on presentation, disclosure, financial statements. They're doing everything. And I have put this NFRA purposely in both slightly bigger font and also in red, because I was just speaking to Mahesh Tolan sir before this program commenced, and this really is the new kid on the block, but we don't know where they are going. We don't know what is going to happen here, because they seem to be taking over a lot of things which which the ICA is supposed to be doing. It's not only about the fact that they have done this work on ILFS and then they did something on Kudremukh Iron Ore Company. They're now given out a consultation paper saying that the small audit should be removed, and all that is fine. But is it really their area? That's something which we really have to worry about. In this present situation as we are today, if you look at what they have done in ILFS, it very clearly, it's a very clear indicator, shall I say, that they are focusing on audit quality also. So I do not know how far they will look at small companies. In my personal opinion, they don't have the bandwidth to look at too many companies, or the small and medium enterprises. But we never know. We never know what they will do. So we'll have to worry about this situation also, about what NAFRA can possibly do here. We all have audit files. I think there's absolutely no denying this. Let's not even think that we don't have audit files. And there is a certain level of quality also. That also we need not deny. We look at checklists. We have, checklists for most of these audits. Those checklists are invariably updated, and we keep documentation to a large extent. All this is happening. There's absolutely no doubt that this is there. But the question we have to ask is, can it be improved? Now, the reason, it's not only because, as I said, this entire discussion is not only because of the AQMM model, but generally, I think the most important thing we have to think of today is, can we defend the audit which we have done? Now, when I'm saying defending the audit, I'm not saying that we have made an error or we have made a mistake. The word defending is coming from the fact that, suppose tomorrow somebody asks us a question. It could be NAFRA, it could be ICA, it could be MCA. Suppose somebody asks us a question and saying that, give me your audit files, I want to see what conclusions you've reached. The question we have to answer is, do we have all that on record? Okay, you may develop this later on, that's not an issue at all, but is it there as the part of your process? This entire AQMM model is built only on developing a process within your firm. It's only about developing a process within your firm, or forming a sort of a process within your firm. I will just give you all a small example, but why we are talking about defending the audit. Again, as I'm saying, We're not saying we made a mistake. It's just about giving enough of evidence for the stances or positions we have taken in the audit. We all know how audits are done. There's a process of commencing the audit. Data is invariably delayed. Data comes in installments, and some decisions are taken on the spot. Some are taken over email. Some are taken over telephone calls. And as we move or we inch closer to the last date, the audit is finally completed. We have never. One of the things about the AQMM model is talking about how many audits have been redone because of filing and all those things. But in this entire process of getting this audit done, I think one of the documents which I would expect to see in an audit file is what were the issues raised, to whom were they raised, and how it was resolved. When I'm saying how it was resolved, I'm talking about how it was resolved ultimately in the audit report. We should remember that any of these regulators are only going to look at our audit reports. They're not going to look at our the balance sheet or the P&L account or the notes and accounts, anything. They're going to look at our audit report and our audit files. So how has this ultimately found a mention in your audit report? Has it found a mention or not? If it has, where? If not, why? I can give you an example of key audit matters. Everybody, again, many participants will be aware of this. Last year, this COVID-related key audit matter was coming up very frequently. Some people put it as other matter, some people put it as a key audit matter. It was all over the place in the audit report. But assuming this year, I mean, whether we have to take a stance with it's over or it is not over. But some companies, many companies, have taken the position that the worst of COVID is over, so that note need not find a place in the financial statements. And obviously, as a carry-on effect, it's also important that the auditor need not carry it in his audit, the key audit matter on COVID. What we are looking for is a document in the audit file which says that this is the COVID note last year. Why was it dropped this year, and what are the reasons for dropping it this year? You can probably say that, okay, sales in the company have improved, profitability has improved. We've got this management, document which says that this is what is happening. The worst of COVID is over. They've opened up their factories, offices are working. Any of those factors could be there. This is the document we are looking for. So, as a practical, solution to this, I would suggest that now that most of the audits are going to be completed in December and January, I would suggest that all of you all take any one of your audits. Need not necessarily be a listed company. It could be a private limited company. It could be a small, a pretty large partnership firm, whatever it may be. Take one of those companies' audit files and try to put in this document. What happened last year? What is the position taken this year? What is the basis of conclusion? I think that is a very good beginning we can make towards going towards this audit quality maturity model. It need not be very lengthy. It can be a single page document. It need not be 25 pages long. It need not have to draw reference to too much of paragraph numbers in the auditing standards. You need not have to worry about Ind AS or IFRS or GST or Income Tax Act for this. It is basically what was the issue which was raised and how it was resolved. I would suggest that all of you all try this, because many of you may be probably having it even today in your audit files. But the reason why I'm saying this is because this one document we see is not present in many audit files. It is there. If you do a little bit of research, you will get the solution. The idea behind this audit quality is not to do that research, but get it in a single document so that everybody is able to know that, okay, this is what has happened. Is it mandatory? It is not mandatory. The ICAI has said that it will applicable from 1st July 2021. As we are speaking today, it is still not been announced. So the Center for Audit Quality, there is a CAQ which has been put up by the ICAI, an institution or a body, if you may call it. The CAQ has been given the task of developing the framework for this AQMM. They have said 1st July, but it's still not recommended. It's still only recommendatory in nature. It's not even going to be. It's not even been officially announced. Shall I put it that way? Right? It has not been officially issued. So this is not a standard, it is not a law, it's not a guidance note. I told you earlier also. So don't worry, there's no what you can say mandatory what you can say backing for this. It's just a model which has been given to the audit firms as a suggestion to improve their audit quality. Even though it is recommendatory in nature, as I have told, and I will repeat this also, please try to take in a few of those things from your from this particular model. So again, I told you about the self-evaluation matrix here. As Maheshwaran sir was rightly saying, it's rightly applicable only to a listed company. Banks other than cooperative banks, insurance companies, firms doing only branch audits are not covered. So listed companies, all banks means corporate central statutory auditors, not the branch auditors, and insurance companies, wherever you are doing the audit for an insurance company. Branch offices, since it's exempt for a bank, would obviously not be, I mean, it will not be applied to insurance branch audits of insurance companies also. But many of us in this program today, we will be having this one listed company, family-owned enterprise. He went for a public issue about 10 years back because he wanted to raise money at that point of time. They went public, and they are still in the public mode only. For those companies, it is important that you follow this model, because even though it may be only like a family-owned concern, not too much of complications there, but yet it would be like it's highly advisable that this model is followed completely for that particular company, because as I have told you all earlier, this a shadow of NAFRA is always going to loom large there. And again, there for a listed company, many regulators, so the risk is always higher. End of the day, we'll only have to look at what is the risk factor we'll have to cover in this particular model. So if you look at the main areas of the audit quality maturity model, AQMM, they have spoken about three principal areas: practice management, operational, which is the core of this entire model, which is the most important section, if you may call it, of this entire model. Human resource management. Many of you, when you'll go through the section or the clauses on human resource management, are going to ask me a lot of questions as to, is human resources really possible for an audit firm which only relies more on article clerks and not so much on HR as in HR. But anyway, there are a couple of takeaways from the human resource management model also, which we can definitely sort of implement. And the last part is practice management strategic functioning. If anybody have gone through the AQMM which has been given by the ICAI, you all will know that the most important phase, the most important set of questions, and those which carry the maximum points or the maximum marks, if you may, is practice management operation. HR, we will get some points because all of us are on the same page as far as HR is concerned. Practice management strategic functional, most of us will get a lot of points there, because it only talks about peer review certificate, code of ethics being followed, any negative comments in the CA&DG and all those things. So I am not really concerned too much about the HR and the practice management function. I think our entire focus, though all the three parts are required for firm to be implemented to get those marks, but I would still say that the most important part we have to remember is the practice management operation. We will come back to the practice management operation, look at what they are saying. They're talking about what are the practice areas of the firm, work for practice manuals, service delivery effort monitoring, quality control for engagements. I'll take you a bit through all these things. Client sensitization, technology adoption, revenue budget and budget pricing, performance evaluation measures. And then in human resources, we have these particular things: human resources, what is the resource planning and monitoring, employee training and development, resources turnover and compensation management, qualification sheet for employees. And as far as the practice management is concerned, we've got only credentials of practice and the infrastructure. Infrastructure, they're talking about, the branch offices and all those things. So as I said earlier also, it's not too much of a problem for us in HR as well as practice, the functional part of it, but the core of this would be the practice management operation. And it is here that I think, even before I get into those questions and answers individually, I would like to state that even though this you've got a total of out of 150 marks or 150 points, shall I say, you have got a total of 80 points or 80 marks only for practice management operation. So it's just about 50%, just about 50%. That itself shows the importance of this practice area. You got 50 for HR, but you know, and 20 for the last part on the credentials part. But the most important numbers come in from the practice management operation part only. Now, even before I get into the points or the questions and the individual answers, I would like to tell all of you all that the importance has been given to a few critical areas. But whenever the practice management operation talks about something like manual, you all need not go and start doing your fresh manual. You may already have a checklist. The checklist itself can be a manual. Your existing checklist, if you fine tune, that itself can possibly act as a manual. So you all need not have to think that do I have to build a separate manual only for this AQMM? May not be required. So wherever you already have an existing quality, benchmark, wherever you have already a quality benchmark, you only have to incrementally improve it. Please do that. You need not necessarily follow only everything which has been mentioned here anew or started fresh, right? Now this entire AQMM is built on this particular metric, this particular what I'm showing you on here. What is the area? When I'm talking about area, I'm talking about the fact that what the AQMM is putting as a benchmark or a criteria for this particular AQMM. What is the metric? What is the metric for that particular area? And what are the points? What are the points we will get for this particular area? The entire model in all the three areas is built around these three. It's in a tabular format. I made it into a tabular format. So it is built around these three things. They will give you a specific, what you can say, benchmark, metric for that benchmark, and ask you all to answer and give the necessary points. It is a completely I won't say self-certification, I won't say self-certification, self-marking mechanism. You've got to mark this on your own, which always carries the risk of, you always want to mark yourself more marks. But that's why I put in that that sort of a disclaimer saying that even if you do have a checklist, please treat it as a checklist, improve it to become a manual. That's all. You look at the first question itself. Because of time constraints, I haven't repeated all the questions and all the metrics. That's a pretty long thing to do. But I also have an Excel sheet, which is sort of compartmentalized all these things separately, and which also has the marking and the maximum marks which can be scored. I will share this Excel sheet with the SARC. Members can pick it up and you can do your own marking for that. Revenue from audit and audit services, because this is an audit quality maturity model, they are saying that 50% of the total revenue should be from audit and assurance services, including all types of audit. They're not only talking about statutory audit. It can be internal audit also, it can be tax audit also. Of course, GST audit, the fate is unknown, so we'll not worry about audit. Anything which is called as an audit, you all will use that as a metric to get minimum of 50%. If you have got 50% of your clients or revenue, 50 to 75% of your total firm revenues are only from this audits, various types of audits, you get 1 point. If it is more than 75%, you get 2 points. Because obviously, being a maturity model for audit quality, they would expect that in case the firm is specializing only in audit and they have more than 75% of the revenue coming in from audits only, we will give them more marks. We'll give them maximum marks or maximum points. Normally, enterprises like us, small and medium enterprises, small and medium firms, they normally have different wings. They normally have, though it's only a Chinese wall, we only have something like an audit wing, and we have a taxation wing, and we have a GST or an indirect tax wing. and probably a consulting. The consulting is in a little bit of a problem because of whether we can do it or not is a question on the Companies Act itself. But with that as it may, you may probably look at having 45 to 50% or just above 50% of your revenues from audit and assurance services. You all will get 1 mark for that or 1 point for that. Obviously, if it is below 50%, you will not be getting any marks. So one of the things which we will have to definitely know is that we will have to be a little bit honest in answering this question, because all these questions, because there are a few questions which will feel like, oh, you know what, I just do it, doesn't matter, I can always do it tomorrow morning in my office, I'd still give myself marks for it. I think the model is talking about what you're going to do as the situation is today, not what you plan to do tomorrow. So in case it's less than 50%, you don't get any marks. Above 50 and between 50 and 75, you get 1 mark, and more than 75%, you get 2 marks for this particular. The next question is very interesting. Does the firm have a vision and mission statement? I should tell all the participants also that you all may find such strange questions. The presence of a vision and mission statement is essential, though it does not make it a criterion for scoring. In at least a few aspects, you all will find that the AQMM wants us to corporatize our practice, HR, vision and mission statement, all these things, mark to market remuneration, all these things. Practically may not be possible, but that's what they're trying to say. But I will not give too much of importance to the vision. If you want to make a vision and mission statement, please make it. Nothing like having a good vision and mission statement saying that we want to be the best audit firm in South India by 2030. You may have that as a vision and mission statement, but I would really pass this because it's not going to give me any marks at all. So anything which does not give us marks, we will best ignore it here. But really, if you want to put in a vision and mission statement, please go ahead and do it, though it won't give you any help in terms of marking here. This is what we're talking about here. Presence of audit manuals, compliance with auditing standard, availability of standard formats relevant for audit quality like letter of engagement, representation letter, working papers, reports. The answer is, the metric is the area is very clear. The metric is yes or not. Do you have it or not? It does not matter in what shape it is. Do you have a checklist? Do you have an audit manual? So the answer is yes. Please take yourself and get yourself 1 point. Answer is no. You don't have it. You can get. You will not get any points. Look at this is what I was telling all of you about. Look at the second part of this. Representation letter, letter of engagement, significant working papers, reports. Significant working papers will definitely be there. Reports will definitely be there. But this letter of engagement and this representation letter is something which we always try to say we will see later on. The client is known to me. If I ask him, he's going to give it to me at any point of time. It is just one email exchange away. I will send it to him and get it back from him. But for the purpose of the AQMM, I will give myself 1 mark, because even though it is not there, I'm assuming it is going to come in some time. I think this is where I think we'll have to say no right now and put our marking after it has come in, not to assume that it will come in, because nobody's saying that it will not come in, but you all would need to keep this in mind that the AQMM is guiding you all towards certain factors which you all should keep in mind. If it is not there today, say no. If you want to improve it and get it from the client, when you get it from the client, it's already improved. You can always say yes and get yourself that 1 mark. Most of our audit papers are focused on checklist and documentation. Some people have something called as a master file or a client KYC file, in which they put all the client data. They also put in all this MRL and all those things in that particular file. And obviously, this will have to be updated every single year. In that file, you all should be having this LOU representation data, working papers, and reports also. The idea behind this is to ensure that you are doing what is required. You're doing what is required in terms of documentation for the purposes of trying to get all the necessary documentation for this particular. Similarly, usage of client acceptance engagement checklist, scoring based on you, yes or no. Evaluation of independence for all the engagements based on the extent required. Many of the questions in the AQMM, have got a link with the code of ethics also, with the code of ethics issued by the ICA. I'm quite sure SIRC has done enough and more programs in the code of ethics. Those 3 big volumes of books which have been issued. The code of ethics has more content than the accounting standard itself, in my opinion. But anyway, they're divided into different categories, so it is okay. For example, one of the threats which we have very frequently, and I'm talking here only from the point of view of the small and medium firms, not in terms of very large firms who have got resources, bandwidth, infrastructure to do whatever they want. We're not talking about those firms. The threat of familiarity will come as a stumbling block in this AQMM. Let me explain how this is. Let us say that you are based in Chennai or Coimbatore or any of these places in South India, Bangalore, wherever it may be, and you've been there for the last let us say 20 years, and you have a client who's been there for the last 9 years, let us say, because 10 years means the concept of rotation would come in there, right? You are of the opinion that, and even the client is of the opinion, both of you know each other very well, which is a fact. Absolutely clean audit report, no qualifications, no EOM, nothing of that sort, no key audit matters also. Whatever client is informing you, or whatever you're asking the client, he's giving it to you. So documentation is also there to a large extent. The ICAI Code of Ethics, talking about this threat of familiarity, has also recognized the fact that it may not be possible for small and medium firms to, have partner rotation and all those things at the end of 2 or 3 years, as is the ideal practice. But you all can probably give this particular client's file or this particular client's documentation outside and get an assessment done whether all the auditing requirements have been followed. So that's the solution given by them. In most of our day-to-day practice, this threat of familiarity is definitely going to crop up very, very frequently. We may not have too much of an intimidation threat, but definitely the threat of familiarity is there, because we've heard this saying, people saying this very frequently: he is not a client, he is more like a friend to me, which is absolutely fine. But will that work when you actually require quality documentation? I think that is one of the questions we definitely have to answer. Irrespective of how well both of you all know each other, irrespective of how transparent, shall I say, all of you are with each other, you still have to insist that if a document is required before sign off, it has to be done before sign off. And again, for this also, I'll give you an example. One of the firms in which I'm interested as a director, not as a as a employee or independent director. Again, it's an international company based in Canada. They have a branch in, they have a subsidiary company in India. And one of the large firms is their auditor. I know them very, very well. They also know me very, very well. And during the course of the audit, as they were just completing the 31st March 21 audit, a question definitely came up about a particular document, which I was appreciating very well. And they also told me that until this document comes, they will not be able to sign the audit. So I think this is where the question of quality comes in. You will have to insist on certain documentation. You will have to insist on certain documentation to ensure that the documentation is complete in all respects, howsoever familiar the client is with you. So I think this is what the AQMM is trying to tell us about this year. I will not worry too much about the other things, because engagement, withdrawal policy, again, templates for the documentation of business understanding, sampling basis. What is your threshold of materiality? What was the basis you determined that on? And do you have checklists for auditing and accounting standards? Now here in this case of this checklist, as I have been maintaining from when I started this presentation, we all have checklists. There's no doubt about it. And we invariably get this from many sources, known sources. And those sources will give us various checklists which we'll use, and there's no harm in that. As long as it is valid for the year, there should be no problem in terms of implementing that checklist for the purpose of the audit. But I think one of the things which we need to definitely look at is that whether the checklist is complete, and there can be certain areas which are specific to the client, which may not be in that checklist. So you all may have to add on that particular point to the checklist to make it a little bit more complete. The client, say, for example, may be having a FCRA issue. He may be having a FEMA issue. Not in normal checklist, but specific to the client because he is a NBFC or private equity or AIF, whatever it may be. So you all may want to just look at the checklist again and try to put in a few clauses which are specific to the client you're trying to audit. That's the first thing. And another thing about these checklists is that apart from trying to add on whatever you feel is necessary, you all may also have to look at what is relevant, not necessary for the client, but in the overall issue of this checklist. I always give this example, so people who have heard me earlier will probably find this as a repetition, but I think it's important to get this message across. You look at your Caro checklist. You take your Caro checklist. It starts off by saying that, does the company have an FAR? So the article clerk goes there and checks the FAR and ticks the FAR for whatever she is seeing that she does that, the FAR is there, no problem. The second question is there a physical verification report? We are assuming that those paragraphs are relevant only to property, plant and equipment, as we know in them now. The second question is there a physical verification report? So she looks at the physical verification report given by the management and she feels, okay, this is also there, not there. I mean, this is also available, so she just ticks it off. That's it. Property, plant and equipment has been done. You will have to probably, ideally speaking, the third question in the Caro checklist should be where any of those assets impaired during the year or tested for impairment during the year. That question is not there in the Caro checklist because it's not there in Caro itself. Because the question is not there, it is not going to be asked, and because it's not going to be asked, it's not going to be answered. We will have to look at the checklist for accounting standards to find out and ask this question whether impairment is there. Ideally speaking, it should be a part of Caro because you may feel that Ind AS or whatever that standard is on intangible assets. You're just going to talk, impairment. You're going to just ask them if this impairment that comes in from the accounting standard, not from the Caro checklist. So you all may want to just do this check once again and see that, do I have to add on, not necessarily from a Caro point of view, but from a property, plant and equipment point of view. Revaluation is there in Caro, but impairment is not there. So we will have to sort of fine tune those checklists according to what is relevant for that particular enterprise. Some of these areas we are getting into now would sound a little bit new to all the participants here. Do you carry out a capacity planning for engagement, which means that, okay, the client has said that you can commence the audit today. Normally it is the other way around. We ask the client that we can commence the audit, but still they are now saying that, do you have this capacity planning, which means that, okay, this company in Coimbatore, we start the audit today. It is going to take us 3 months time. We will have to put 2 people there, 1 audit manager there. This is the service. This is the amount of time they are going to spend, and this is when the audit is expected to be completed. We should remember that. Okay, assuming that we do not have it, I'm taking a call here that most of us do not have it, because when the client says commence audit, we commence the audit. We don't look at capacity planning and budgeting and planning and all those things. We may have it at the back of our mind, but we will not document it. We will say, okay, can we do this in this particular peak season? Should we start the audit or not? Can we wait for some more time? Can we defer this by another 10 or 15 days? All that is happening in the back of our mind, but whether we actually document this in terms of a separate document, I don't think it is there in most of the firms. But in case it is there also, we should remember that this has got a direct link with the amount of fees we are going to charge also here, which means that if you are going to spend a lot of time and you are going to get a very low fees, that also may not be the best things in terms of audit quality. It's always been felt that, I mean, whether it's right or wrong is a different issue. The higher the fees, the better the audit quality. Or even if you do not want to link it directly to the fees, I'll put it this way. The more time you spend in an audit, the audit gets better, audit quality gets better. If you are being compensated for that time, nothing like it in terms of, you know, the fees which you're going to charge for this particular. Again, you see here, our budget versus actual analysis of time and effort spent carried out to identify the costing and the pricing. The scoring here is based on the percentage of engagements in which the compliance with budget versus actual are carried out. And you can see here that the institute has slightly given us, trying to test our Excel skills here, up to 10%, 0 point, more than 10%, 30 points, more than 90%, 5 points. Budget, time and effort spent to identify the costing and the pricing. In most of our audits, the audit fees is already decided. It is invariably fixed. Last year's audit fees plus some small, increase for inflation, whatever it may be, right? It's invariably fixed. We don't have to do, much thinking to do about that. If the fees is on the lower side, we can always go and ask for a raise. We can always go and ask for a raise. Ultimately, it's a question of negotiation. The AQMM wants us to do this exercise, and I would believe that the reason for this is that don't spend unproductive time in the audit. So the one thing is to make the budget versus actual effort, because unless it's a new audit, we invariably have past experience how long it is going to take. Last year it took 2 months. This year maybe we'll try to make it down in 45 days. So that sort of an analysis is what people are talking about in this AQMM model here. But again, then you can see that this also has a link with the costing of the firm. How is this going to impact your pricing? Are you going to charge more in cases an overshoot? In case there's an overshoot, are you going to charge more? Is it a part of your engagement? Is it a part of your engagement? And I'm quite sure all of you would probably agree with me when I say that in most of the audits, a lot of time is spent just waiting for data to come. Whether that is productive or they're doing other work, we do not know. But a lot of time is spent in this state. So the idea behind the service delivery effort monitoring is to ensure that you spend quality time only in the audit, otherwise doing other work and not necessarily, and try to minimize the unproductive times there in the audit. Don't just sort of be there for the purposes of being there. That's all, right? Technology. Are you using timesheets for tracking the audit work? Again, yes or no. That's very simple there. In case it's a DCMM, the digital competency model version 2 may be referred to arrive the technical maturity of the firm. That is a separate model by itself. Even though the AQMM also has got a lot of points on the technology adoption, they're saying for digital competency, please look at the DCMM model. Do you use tools to track activity like project management, say timesheets? You may have timesheets on Excel. It is also important that not only having the timesheets, but also what are the content of those timesheets. Is it just being marked as 8 hours per day without saying which client, what work was done? I think this is where the quality also comes in. Is it just a template for the purposes of putting in a template? Is actual work which is being done accounted or recorded there? I think these questions would need a definite answer from this particular question. A lot of time has been spent in this AQMM on this, obviously because it's audit quality. we will have to look at a lot of these questions on quality control. Obviously, do you have a partner review? Do you have a quality reviewer? This is not about the peer review board. This is not about the FRRB. This is not about NAFRA. This is just about within the firm as a part of your process. Are you giving this audit file, so to speak, to another partner for an independent review? Maybe the answer is no today. Maybe the answer is no today, because in this present day and age, when we are just having limited resources, limited time, where's the question for another partner to review this? Or you can probably give it outside. That's what the model of even the code of ethics also says the same thing. It blesses the fact that you can always give it outside to somebody else. The idea behind this is very, very clear, that if you have a person who is not involved with the audit to take an independent view or to look at the files with a fresh set of eyes, there is always going to be scope for improvement. You can suggest that. They may not be able to change the conclusions reached in the audit report. They will not be changed to change the figures in the audited financials. But it is just about reviewing of the quality, which means that how much of quality has actually been achieved in this particular audit is the question which many of us are wanting to ask in this particular case. So that's what we have to see for partner. As I said, you may look at it from an outside perspective also. You may want to give it to somebody outside also. May not be necessarily peer review board, may not necessarily be a person who is your partner, because you may not have the bandwidth for that, but you can go to somebody outside also. You also look at the questions here and ask, you look at what they are saying here. As per quality review, that's the next question here. Number of engagements without findings by the ICAI, committees of ICAI regulators, which are requiring significant improvement. So, have any regulators come in and asked any questions on your, or are there been negative findings on those questions? Or have they given some adverse remarks? Later on, I will give you also a couple of examples of the C&AG. There also we have to be very careful, because C&AG is becoming very aggressive nowadays. The entire focus of these three questions is that, has the firm got any negative comments from any regulator, or including the ICAI? It could also be disciplinary committee proceedings. It could be anything of that sort. So there, that you will have to answer specifically and say yes or no. Documentation in accordance with standard of SQC1. SQC1, there are a lot of standards of auditing on quality documentation. Do you have this documentation in place? Do you have everything what SQC1 says? So many members or many participants in the program may already be thinking now that this is going to be a very complex job. We cannot do this for a small and medium firm like us. He's talking about so many things wherein we have to maintain quality, checklists there, and all those things may not be practically possible. Is what many of the participants may be thinking. My response to you all is going to be that it is a one-time effort for, let us say, this year. That quality which you have got and which you want to improve is going to be incremental in nature only. It's just a one-time effort. You'll just have to look at what the AQM is saying. Identify those areas for improvement which is lacking in your firm, which is not there in the firm, and just implement them. So it's not going to be a fact that it's going to be complex or something. Your base document is always going to be your present processes in the firm. All the AQM is really trying to say is that, is there any way you can improve your present processes? That's all they're trying to say. So you all need not have to necessarily redo the entire thing. Don't have to redo the entire thing. Just start from where you are already and start, making this progress towards this thing. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Now, does the firm follow standard delivery methodology for practice standards and tools? Efficiency of benchmark delivery. I told you, ISO 9000 quality they're expecting for audits now. Right. And now you see what is the next second question is very, very interesting. Does the firm evaluate the efficiency and benchmark monitoring the number of statutorily backed engagements closed on time before due date, belated filing, completion, etc.? Number of statutory engagements reworked, filing errors, information insufficiently, long interpretation of provisions, etc. So you look at this service delivery benchmarking, they are trying to say that the firm has got such a process wherein they are okay, they are following some standard procedures, and and they have got standard process also. And because of this particular process they've got, they're able to complete the audit at a good quality and probably faster also. The AQM has looked at this in two aspects. One is, are you finishing the audit earlier and better also, faster, or is it being reworked? When we're saying reworked, is the audit being done again and all those things? I mean, does it have to be refiled? Has it been restated? All these things. Of course, I'm quite sure all the participants are going to tell me that how is it possible to do it before time when the website itself is not working with the income tax department? I'm quite sure that many of you have got this response, but I'm going to let that pass because generally speaking, we all know that before the due date is maybe a few clients only. It's not going to be for all the clients, but for us, on the due date is going to be for most of the clients. So as long as it's not reworked or it's belated or it has gone beyond the due date, we should be happy, which I think is something which many of us would probably not be having in most of our cases. We'll definitely be filing it before the due date. Okay, now reworked, very important for us to look at this. Statutory audit engagements reworked. Many of you who are in this program will also be doing C&AG audits. The C&AG calls for the accounts and invariably gives some sort of an opinion on their views on this. In some cases, it is restated. I'll use the word called revised. I won't say restated. I will say revised. Has that been reworked? Would that fall under reworking category here? We still don't have too much of details on what exactly would go into this here, but my opinion would be probably no for that, because it is not a reworking. It is just a difference of opinion, shall I say, between the firm and what the C&AG says. Of late, in the last 2.5 and 3 years, I have been seeing that the C&AG is becoming a little bit more aggressive in the stance they take with companies. They're becoming very, very aggressive in the stance. They're asking companies to revise their accounts. They're telling the auditors, please revise the audit report also. Please get the audit report re-signed because of the fact that this entry has to be done or this observation has been made. To my mind, that would not be a part of this for the simple reason that it's not a reworkment, it is just a sort of a difference of opinion. That's all we try to say. But we will have to see what, we don't have much more content than what we have in the PDF document of the AQMM. So probably we'll get some more documentation in due time and we can see this, right? Number of client delays disputes is obviously going to be a negative on your AQMM. The more client disputes you have, the more problematic it is going to be for your AQMM, because obviously nobody wants to have a client dispute there. And you also review the frequency of backlog, engagement, and all those things, and not commenced upon time. So all this is basically trying to bring in what is called as best-in-class practices for the CA firms. If you say that you're going to commence an audit today, please commence today. Don't say article did not come, we do tomorrow. You're supposed to be having a sort of a backup plan for that also. So backlog, if in case the backlog is too high, then you're talking about is very significantly high. But there is no clarity on what constitutes a client dispute. 90% of our disputes with the client are with the fees only. Would that be a client dispute? Again, there's no guidance here, but it may not be a dispute, it may probably be a negotiation. So again, there we do not know whether it's going to come in as a dispute or not, but again, there also I would probably stick my neck out and say no, because dispute means wherein you are having a dispute with the client on something to do with the audit, not on the fees part. You don't agree with his opinion. You want to put it in your audit report. He does not agree. That is a dispute. You want to make a qualification. He does not agree. You want to, that's a dispute. Why all qualification also? You want to add a note in the notes and accounts. It doesn't like that also will become a dispute, because they want a very clean balance sheet because of whatever reason they are trying to think of. The AQM is thinking that in case there is a client dispute, there is going to be a negative marking for you. So you can see what they have done here is that, and this is where I think we would need a little bit, the ICA should take it a bit cool here and a bit slow here. They have given us what is called as a negative scoring. Completely unheard of for us, apart from those registered valuers here who have got this registered valuation course, they have got negative marking. Depending upon the number of statutory audit engagements that are reworked for filing errors, information insufficiency, wrong interpretation of provisions, etc., you will have a negative scoring, which means that less than 5% are reworked, no point. 5 to 15% minus 1 point. 15 to 30% minus 2 points, and then it goes on and on. Negative scoring has been introduced for the first time. Again, if you look at interpretation of provisions, revision by the CA&DG can be interpretation of provisions. I have two problems here. One is that what exactly is this clause wanting us to do? I mean, what do we include here? Do we include things like our normal negotiations or normal difference of opinion, or is it a larger perspective pertaining to the audit only? That's my first problem. And second, and probably more important problem, is that it is too early for us to include negative scoring for such criteria. We should remember that we are just embarking upon this model. We are just embarking upon this model. At the starting itself, you are going to say negative scoring is going to put off many chartered accountants or many audit firms. They're going to say, why should I follow this model at all? Because there is absolutely no necessity. You can give us 0 marks, no problem. But don't include negative scoring here, because that really is not required when we are just commencing this journey towards this audit quality. I don't think we should have negative marking. Similarly for client disputes also here. See, agreed, this is a self certification. We are going to do this on our own. But as we will see later on, there are questions about the self-certification also. Is the ICA going to really trust your self-certification all the time? May not be. They may bring in somebody at some point of time later on, say, okay, just go and check what he has done. I believe this will also be one of the criteria for the peer review to include in this peer review report. But look at client disputes also. Same problem there also. Client disputes, they are talking about less than 5%, 0, and 15% again negative points. So in my opinion, I've also written this to the CAQ and told them this and said that you give us 0 point if you have got a certain number of, let us say 5% of our clients there is dispute, or 5% of the clients there is a reworking of the statement which has happened. You give us negative points. We are okay. We'll buy that. We'll live with that. No problem. But don't give us negative points, because really doesn't make any sense for us to have negative points at the time when we are just getting into this entire journey of AQMM. As I have said earlier also, and I will repeat this, though we have a digital competency maturity model, a lot of importance has been given in the AQMM for technology adoption. Many of us are already technologically savvy. We already have good skills on Excel and all those formulas and doing all those VLOOKUP, all those things we are doing it. And the AQMM is going a little bit beyond that. See, the Excel and whatever you're trying to do for PDF and all these things are for your normal day-to-day, though your skill sets. You're not adopting technology, you're just having a skill set in that particular way. The AQMM, especially on technology, goes a little bit further than that. And they're talking about all sorts of new areas wherein technology has to be adopted. participants in the program will definitely agree with me when I say that technology has definitely changed the way in which even we are operating. Leave alone, I'm not talking about the high technology companies, even the way we are operating also has changed a lot because of technology. It is both benefit and also a threat. It's also a threat because many people have got this impression that technology are going to replace accountants and all those things. But I think that right now it's a little bit far-fetched. Technology is not going to replace accountants, at least for some time. But what things like ML and all can do, machine learning, AI and all can do, they can sort of do repetitive tasks very easily without intervention of any new data inputs. Again, the AQM model is not sticking only to those areas. They're going a little bit beyond those areas. And look at what they're talking about, apart from whatever you're talking about in terms of leave and management and all those things, it all should be apparently automated or using our technology. They are talking about digital storage of records on a centralized server or a cloud. 10-15 years back, it would not have been possible for us to think of buying space on the cloud at all. Today, it has become so reasonable that we can have all our data on the cloud at a very reasonable cost, at a very reasonable price, at a very reasonable charge. It doesn't cost much also. Do you have a digital library there? Again, here, if you look at this from the point of view of what the AQM is driving at, they want the firms to develop this process in-house. Do you have, I'll give you a very simple example. Do you all have all the standards of auditing or a centralized server or on a cloud server where everybody in the firm, right from the partners up to article class, can access it easily? This will also enable them to get over this bad habit of searching for Google for everything. Google is not the solution for auditing and standards. I've actually told many of the people in my firm that you should stop using Google. Google is not going to give you a solution. The standard will give you a solution, not Google by itself. Because suppose by chance you're looking at the wrong page or an outdated page, it will really be harmful for the client also, right? So the AQM model is looking at those particular issues and trying to fix that and say that, do you have these things in your listing? I will just look at a few things. Video conferencing is already in because that's why all of you are participating in this video conferencing thing today. Do you have only licensed versions of the software? Again, a very important point. I'm assuming that all of you all do, but sometimes we are also tempted into getting this unlicensed version because of the cost which is going to be involved. But if you are really going to have a discussion on audit quality, it is very important that you'll use the official licensed version of software. Email IDs is a very interesting point. See, globally, there has been this sort of a feeling, or it's more as a suggestion, shall I say, that if you are running an official business, you should have an official email ID. If you are running a service firm, a professional firm, you should have an official email ID for the firm. Your Gmail ID or your Yahoo ID is only supposed to be for your personal purposes. It has happened in many cases. People have also asked me this question, saying that why is that person replying in his Gmail ID? Does he not have an official ID? Many people have asked this question many a time. Many of you would obviously be having your own websites also. So on the website, or you can ask the website developer, there is a possibility of picking up a few email IDs there itself. So it appears that the AQM model is talking about the firm, about the situation wherein you are trying to use only email IDs, which are official. Even if it is Gmail, use an official Gmail ID. You have got requirement there also. You can do something in your Gmail to get an official ID. Similarly, if you look at the antivirus, again, I'm quite sure that all of you are already following this to a large extent, but again, it's important that we get this message across that the more we go onto the cloud, the more we keep things open, the risks are obviously going to be higher. There's absolutely no two ways about it. Many of you have been probably reading what is happening in Facebook and all those companies there. Every single time you click on Instagram, something is happening in Instagram somewhere else. People are recording your information, which is why all those ads keep coming up saying that this is what, do you want to go for this? The only thing they don't want to do is come and sell you that particular stuff, right? But the risk is obviously there, and when the risk is there, yesterday you already probably seen the Prime Minister's email ID, Twitter ID also was hacked for a few moments. You need to be a little bit careful here. The more we get involved in technology, the more complex it becomes. All the AQM model is saying is that if you are going to invest in an official licensed version of the software, please get an official licensed version of antivirus also. They're asking us to make investments in that particular area and try to invest in technology so that the risk is sort of minimized. This is again something which is far-fetched, but still the AQM has brought this up. Many of you are probably aware that new keywords nowadays are AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And of course, in the present space, we've got something called as fintech, and we've got something called as BNPL. The world is changing so fast that every day a new term is coming up here. Will it be possible for AI and ML to take over the work which we are doing? The definite answer for that is going to be no. Some part of the work, the definite answer is going to be yes. Repetitive journal entries, we need not do. ML will do it, in which the value does not change, provided all those things are the same. Artificial intelligence today has proved to be successful only in the medical world, wherein if you give, or machine learning also, when you give a set of photographs and try and ask the machine to match it, it tells you what is wrong based on the inputs you have given there. It still remains a basis is going to be your own basis only. It's not going to be something which the computer sort of innovates. Deep machine learning is something wherein the computer itself will give you some suggestions because more data sets are involved there. In all this AI and ML and technology, we should remember one single fact, which is an undisputed fact, that inputs are given by us only. The more authentic your inputs, the better the result. There is very simple equation. If your inputs are not authentic, you don't expect authentic results also. I think that is how we have to look at this. But unfortunately, as I said, unfortunately, the world is changing so fast that we need not, we need to keep pace with what is happening there. It's not going to be very long before some sort of fintech comes into our profession also. Audit reports, for example, if it is going to be the same audit report, it can be done by the machine. We may not have to require a human interface. Caro, for example, if only the most important thing in Caro which probably changes is those income tax and those GST numbers. Apart from that, Caro remains the same. Are you investing in that? I'm not. They're not trying to tell you that you should invest in MI or what you can say for the firm purposes, but employees should be technologically capable of trying to understand what the computer is trying to throw at you. A good example I can give you is SAP. Many of you who are participating will probably be very well aware of how SAP works. If you're doing an audit of a company which is run on SAP, you all would need to know SAP or get somebody who knows SAP, because the mirror accounting concept, those reversal of journal entries, approval systems there, all those things are something which require a deep insight or a little bit of inputs there. People say knowledge of the business, here is also knowledge of technology. That is what the AQM model is trying to say, because If you are not aware of it, you're going to probably lose it. You'll probably not be able to, ask a proper question there. So it's very important that those skill sets also are developed within the firm. Do you have analytical tools for listed entity banks and insurance companies? Of course, today in the present world of Ind AS and all detailed disclosures, there is enough and more data available out there. So I don't think we have a lack of data for the purpose of analysis. I mean, we definitely have a lot of data out there. It's just important again to look at what is the quality of the data, and to know whether we can do, say, for example, a ratio analysis. Everyone talks about NPAs, but do we look at categories of NPAs? Banks have it. Banks do have it. They have classes of NPAs. Have you gone beyond the limits of lending prescribed by the Reserve Bank of India? Banks have got it. How many times have you exceeded the limits in the past? All this data is available. The good thing about India and the world today is that there is no lack of data. Any auditor who wants data on any of those inputs will definitely be able to get that data in the public domain or from sources which are known sources here. But use that data. For example, annual report of companies gives a lot of benchmarks. Other banks give a lot of benchmarks. ECL model under Ind AS. So many ECL models have been developed all over the world. What is though banks in India are technically speaking not in Ind AS, but still, what is going to be the thing which will happen? So data is there. How are we going to use that data for the purpose of analytics? Again, let me repeat here that there is absolutely no necessity to invest in anything. MS Excel can do your job. It will do your job, right? Awareness of all these things. I will just give you all a simple example of why technology or how technology is taking over our world. Many of you have probably heard of Dunzo, the app called Dunzo, and I've been using that app whenever it is required to do some transactions there. And invariably, when it comes to the payment stage, I use either the net banking or credit card, whatever it is, to make the payment. A few days back, I had to do a transaction for about 350 rupees or whatever it is on Dunzo. And as I was using the app on my mobile phone, it's really interesting. All of you should really look at this or hear this out. But as I was using this app and sort of agreed to what was happening there and agreed on the amount also, the next screen, I obviously did not know what happened, but by the time I did the next click, it said that the payment has already been made to an app called as SIMPL, Simple, which apparently is this app on Buy Now Pay Later. I didn't know what was happening because of the fact that I did not use my debit card, I did not give my password, I did not give the OTP, nothing happened. But the amount went out. There's no point in asking the person to whom the consignment went, because they have no clue what is happening here. There was no point in asking Dunzo because I knew that Dunzo has given this information, obviously, because I did not even have this app on my mobile phone. And then later I came to know this is one of those apps for this BNPL, Buy Now Pay Later. So what they will do is that they have tied up with these entities and they'll give you a credit limit based on your transactions with Dunzo, and you will have to pay them after 15 days. Just to give you all an idea as to how quickly things happen and how technology is enabling it. Now, you may not want to go for it. Now that I know what it is, I'll not go for it. But look at these various fintech companies and all who are coming up there. So definitely technology is going to play a very important role. You all will definitely ask me the classical question when the question hour comes and say that, sir, all this we cannot do for our firm, sir. What we can, we were having one small office, how we can do all these things? Again, the answer to that question is going to be to the extent possible only. The response is always going to be to the extent possible. You need not do the whole thing. It's only for the to the extent possible. So what happens now here? Since I told you all earlier that 80 points or 80 marks for this, the top 3 are quality control, technology adoption, and benchmarking of service delivery. Quality control means using of all those manuals, SQC1, all those things. That gives you 19 points. 44 points of 80 are only in these things. The others are small areas where we have seen. Adoption of technology, 15 points, and benchmarking of service delivery is for 10 points here. So again, you can see here that even if you look at how this, just to look at this set itself will give you all quite a few points, eight or 9 points will give you. If you just have to invest in a cloud storage, invest in a antivirus package, both are linked. Can you participate in Zoom calls? We know that Zoom has got this limit of 40 minutes or whatever it is. Do you want to go for a paid version? May not be required. It depends on how you want to use it. All these questions need to be answered. So for this first part, practice management operation, my suggestion to the participants in the program today would be that just focus a little bit on updating your manuals, updating your documentation. Maybe in case technologically you don't have these things, maybe adopting the technology, like for example, cloud storage or antivirus packages, or for example, even your email IDs. Make a beginning. There is absolutely no doubt that we cannot change this AQMM overnight. That is why I said this is a journey. You're just commencing this journey. So start on this in incremental manners. Don't lose sight of it. That's all I'm saying. If you have an opportunity to get a cloud storage at a very cheap cost, go for it. If you have got an opportunity to get an antivirus package as a part of the New Year offer, buy it, take it. Start thinking of this, because this is how this is going to evolve over a period of time. If you all are going to give me a target and say that by June 30th, 2022, I will be completely as per this AQMM model, it is not going to happen. I can assure all of us it's not going to happen. It will take time. Even for the best of firms, it will take a lot of time. It also requires a lot of effort also. So just focus on those three things for the first part of it. And see, benchmarking of service delivery, we know how it is in practice. We're not going to do, really do that benchmarking as such. But I think the point we have to answer as professionals is that if there is an overshoot of the time, can we get paid for it? I'm not saying this with a view to only increase the audit fees, but again, there should be a cost benefit analysis at some point of time. That appears to be what the AQM is saying for audit quality. Do you have a cost benefit analysis? No audit, most audits at least, will not go exactly as planned. There will be an overshoot. Are we being compensated for it? Yes or no? That is what we'll have to look at for this particular thing. We will now come to an area wherein a lot of questions will definitely be asked, I'm quite sure, but still, as I said, we're going to corporatize the CA practice. We're going to corporatize CA firms here, and they talk about human resource. They've got 4 or 5 benchmarks. Resource planning and monitoring linked to your audit quality. Are you those things I told you all about in audit quality? This is linked to that. But my takeaway for this entire thing, from this entire human resources model, is going to be a very simple thing. Employee training and development. Employee training policy, number of days spent per employee for this training and development. For the purposes of this discussion, I am going to say that article clerks are also employees, because we cannot ignore the fact that most CA firms are dependent on article clerks to a large extent. So, I mean, obviously, whatever resource allocation planning, whatever we are doing, it revolves around the article clerks only. Okay, you may have chartered accountants, you may have paid employees, you may have part-time employees, all that is fine, but they also all result as a part of your article clerks. My suggestion is going to be very clearly that firms are doing it, I'm quite sure, but please spend a little bit more of time on employee training and development. I tell this with one singular factor in mind, which is that compliance today has become such a burden that it is impossible for a human being, individual practicing chartered accountant, to keep track of what is happening around them. Every alternate day, some new legislation comes in, some new form comes in, some notification comes in. You may want to keep track of it. You may be keen, you may be interested, maybe your area of interest, your area of practice, but still, I think we'll have to accept the fact that it's going to be humanly impossible. The idea behind this employee training and development is going to be that please spread out your resources in such a manner that people keep learning, and all of you all get together, say, once in a month and try to understand what is happening in that particular field. This is the only way it will work. You need not have to do this on a weekly basis or whatever. That depends, of course, on how the firm is placed. But please get together. Let all these people come together and decide on one particular topic. I cannot overemphasize the importance of employee training and development. And in a way, it is good that the ICAI has thought to put this as a very focused area, because obviously this is the USB of the ICAI as a body also. They do focus a lot on training also, right? So this is a very useful takeaway from the AQM model. Again, firms are doing it. I know firms are doing it. I know a lot of firms are doing this informally. They are having every Saturday meetings, or they're going outside and having some meetings. This is all happening informally. AQM model is trying to tell us to document that also. You all can see where this improvement, I told you about the word called incremental improvement. It is coming from here. Next Saturday or the coming Saturday, your firm is going to have a talk on GST by one of the partners. You send an email, no problem. All the employees do come, all the articles do come. Have a small register in which you're also documenting the fact that this session happened. That is the incremental improvement required by the AQM model. Suppose somebody comes to your office, you can always tell them that, look, we have done so many programs this year. We have spoken on GST, we have spoken on indirect taxes, we have spoken on accounting standards, we have spoken on Ind AS, everything we have done. That is the incremental improvement the model is asking us to do. I don't have to read this slide because all of you are going to say, again, this is not going to be possible. Turnover, no problem. Health insurance, not applicable. Progress of people through established framework and time, engagement level review. Evaluate what kinds of engagements are there for who's doing what type of engagements here. Again, this is more a part of resource planning. Access to technology, infrastructure, and methodology for better, what you can, basically improvement of day-to-day work, including favorable remote working policies. Coaching and mentoring program, investment, especially women colleagues, to enhance the diversity of audit leaders in the profession. Ignorable point, but it's important point, but it's may not be practical to right now. When I look at the last clause, I was really wondering what the ICAI is trying to do in terms of audit quality. Special policies to provide people time to regenerate, especially after a busy audit season. I really have to appreciate the ICAI for thinking of this also as a point to be included, because they know for a fact that we're all hard pressed for time and we just move from one crisis to another. Today this crisis is there, tomorrow morning something else. When you get up in the morning, something else will come up there. They mentioned this, saying that, does the firm have a policy to provide people time to regenerate, especially after a busy audit season? They are not talking about regeneration in any other form, just giving them time. Giving them time, in my opinion, probably be then allowing them to take a few days off after a busy audit season. Again, we are doing this in a very informal manner. They want a policy for this. Do you have a particular policy? The benefits of this or the advantages of this are not disputed at all. It is very obvious that people who have taken a break always come back better prepared to take on the next assignment. There's no doubt about it at all. It could be 1 day, it could be 2 days, it could be 3 days. we do face a lot of pressure in our work. We have basically our pressure is time-based pressure. Time-based pressure means we will have to do a particular assignment within a particular time frame. That itself is a lot of pressure upon us. So this is a very good thing. What the AQMM is saying is that please try and make this a little bit more formal, document it. Tell them that, or tell the partner, audit manager, article like that, after you do this audit, 2 days you can take off. Document it as a policy. May not be specific for each type of audit, as a general principle. That's what your office will believe in. Many people may do this on their own. They may still say, I want a break. I will take 2 days off. But because this AQM model is targeted towards the firm, permit that as a firm policy. That's what they're trying to say. And it is very clear that, probably proved a lot in our profession also, that the more time we get, the better the audit quality. So without time pressure, I'm saying, without time pressure. So therefore, this is a pretty interesting insertion into the AQM model, which I thought, is really good, because, many firms who are, many companies, MNC companies do this. They tell people to please don't come to work for some time. Foreign companies specialize in this. They have a very clear policy that you will not come on certain days for work. So I think the idea is not to just give them holidays, but also to ensure that the time pressure of having to do deadlines does not hit you all in a adverse manner. That's why they're asking us to do this again. Focused policies and support for staff well-being, engagement, and communication. Engagement, establish, listen to people and their views and suggestions. Credible employee survey, recruiting people. Now this is where it gets a little bit complex now. Okay, we have got a CA firm with, let us say, we've got 3 partners, 30 architect clerks, 1 chartered accountant. That's it, over, we are done. How do we put in this focused policies for staff? Because the majority of the people are article clerks. 50% of them are anyhow on leave for the examinations. It may not be, practical for us to do this. But they seem to be thinking that we should probably be having some mechanism in place for this. And are they being compensated as per the defined approach where salary is mapped to the person, knowledge and experience of the employee? Again, the ICAI has probably thought of a very long-term, what you can say, frame for this, because again, this is always an area for dispute. At least I have not met any employee who has said that he's very happy with the salary. There's always scope for improvement there also. But then again, how much of this is going to be practical for us to apply, depending on the number of employees we get or we have got, is going to be a problem there. When I said HR and audit firms, I've put in this issue of contentious issue of stipends. We're all living with this problem, this contentious issue. What is this contentious issue? We have got many complaints from article clerks. They always come when the stipend is less. And what we are doing is that the firm is taking a policy to pay a higher stipend, which is what we should do, because if we don't do it, we're not going to get those articles. That's simple as that. It's a very straight black and white equation. We pay a higher stipend, we get article clerks. We don't pay a higher stipend, we don't get article clerks. But in my mind, to my mind, I would probably think that this issue of stipend has to be solved by the ICAI. They should probably improve on, or they should probably, try to ensure that the stipend is sort of, increased to a reasonable level. They could have some sort of a basis for that, because what is happening now is that because each firm is free to pay what they want, we've got a class of article clerks will go only to certain firms and not to other firms. So this sort of a diversion, so shall I say, is happening. So I think the ICAI should probably come out and say that firms can still opt to pay more. Firms can still opt to pay more. I'm not saying that they should not, because you want the best, you have to pay the best. There's no doubt about it. But then, the ICAI can come out with certain benchmarks for this, so that all the firms are on even plate, at least at the starting level. People are still keen to come for work and not for the stipend only. So I think that HR and audit firms should the issue of stipend should probably be done by the ICA and not by the individual firms. They should probably. I do not know when the last stipend was increased for Article Lux. Maybe it was 4 or 5 years back, but they should do this on a more regular basis, because if your base is high, the number of people who are coming will also be better. So I think that is what we have to look at. So in terms of the first part, I told you all that please develop those manuals. In the terms of second part, HR and audit firms, my only suggestion to all of you all will be that please invest in training. When I'm saying invest in training, I'm saying please conduct the training. Once in a month, have this session in your office. Anybody can come and speak. Nowadays, with this technology improving, it can be done online also. There is no necessity for us to be physically present. Let the views, you don't even have to call it as a training session. Let it be a very informal session. Record it, document it. That is all is required. So that what happens is that when the knowledge is spread across various, people, the quality of their interactions also improves a lot. Which brings me to the last part of this AQMM model, which talks about practice management. Does the firm have a balanced mix of experienced and junior partners? Very, very important and very interesting point also this is, because of the fact that the AQMM also realizes that the experienced partners brings in a certain skill set, the junior partners bring in a certain skill set. Technology may not be the forte of the experienced partners. It will be the forte of the junior partners. Code of ethics, auditing standards, accounting standards may not be the core area for the junior partners. The senior partners will obviously have a lot of savings. The AQMM model seems to be thinking that, and I think they are right in this, that if this balance is okay, this balance is fine, we've got a balanced mix, it will be good for the audit quality itself. Again, you have a few points with this here. Is the firm compliant to the ICA Code of Ethics, Companies Act, and in relation to conflict of interest? I think, as I said earlier also, I think SIRC has done a lot of programs in Code of Ethics. I would like to tell the participants in today's program that the Code of Ethics is not a question of can I do this or can I not do this. As a practicing firm, as a practicing chartered accountant, can I do this or can I not do this? I don't think the Code of Ethics today, as it stands today, is that. It talks about a lot of other things. It talks about, say for example, referral fees. Referral fees can be paid. It talks about getting an outside expert to check your work. It's much beyond just do and don't of what we can do in practice. So have you followed that? Do you have a guideline? Is what they're trying to ask. Is there a whistleblower policy? I think I'm going to pass this question because it's going to be difficult to expect whistleblowers to be there in the CA firm. But as I said, I think the ICA has gone with a very long-term point of view and not looked at just put in this model here so that we can ensure that things are happening as per this model itself. Do you have a peer review certificate? Obviously, you will have it because of the fact that it's required for a lot of audits. It's required for a lot of work also. Are you empaneled with the RBI and C&AG? Answer is going to be yes. Do you hold any ISO certification? No, definitely not. If you have, put in that also as an yes. Is there an advisory? Is there an advisory or a decision not to allow audit due to unsatisfactory performance by the C&AG office? I mentioned a bit about this earlier in the presentation, but I will elaborate on this now because many of you may be doing C&AG audits also. As I said earlier, over the last 2 or 3 years, what has happened is that the C&AG has become a little bit more aware of what is happening in the audit space. They become aware of Ind AS, they become aware of auditing standards, they become aware of what is happening in these areas also. What has come with this awareness is their own interpretation of this particular thing. They may be right, they may be wrong. It's not a question of right or wrong here. But what has happened in this process is that there has been a difference of opinion between the auditor and the C&AG on many topics in many companies, particularly in respect of specific aspects of Ind AS. And sometimes what has happened is that difference of opinion has taken on slightly unfavorable terms. We know of a particular audit firm which was recommended for blacklisting by the C&AG because they could not get along with each other in terms of this discussion point. When the discussion came, they could not get along with each other. So the C&AG recommended them for blacklisting. This is also happening as a more recent development, as I told you. So I think we need to be a little bit careful here, because don't step on the toes of the C&AG. Try to get a via media solution. You may still stick to your stand. You may still stick to your stance and say that, okay, this is what we are saying, but try to work out, maybe a disclosure will help. I don't know, obviously depends upon the problem which is being discussed here, but not only will it give you a negative in the AQMM, but it will also ensure that you have a future problem as far as your this thing is concerned. So I think we should be a little bit more careful about the C&AG part. Government blacklisting, RBI, negative assessment, QRB. Has there been any professional misconduct on the part of the firm or a part of the member, but he has been proved guilty? Now, this is a very interesting topic here, wherein they have asked a very specific question. And the question is that, has there been a case of professional misconduct on the part of the member of the firm where he has been proved guilty? So the question arises that there was a case of professional misconduct. I have been proved not guilty. Should I disclose it or not? Should I mention this or not? The very obvious answer is going to come to us is going to be no. Why should we disclose when it's already not guilty? I would completely, agree with that particular point of view, that particular response. Also, I definitely agree with it. It only, you look at it from the point of view of better and proper disclosure. I would probably think that there is no harm in saying that this case came up. We're going to say, obviously say no here, but we'll also tell them we've been proved not guilty. No harm in being more transparent here. May not be today, but as the model evolves, as the AQMM evolves, maybe we can look at it from that point of view and try to give better disclosure for this year. Otherwise, all these practice credentials questions are going to be negative marking for us. We should be negative marking for us. We need to be a little bit careful there. Minimum scale of fees of the ICAI is also one of the practice credentials. This is a topic on which I'm sure each of the participants here will have their own response to this. They'll have their own view to this. They'll have their own problems also with this, because I think for a vast majority of us, forget charging. Even thinking of charging a minimum scale of fees of the ICAI may not be practicable. I'll put it that way. In certain cases, yes. In certain cases, no. On an average, the answer is no. Ultimately, I think the audit fees is an area wherein the client and the auditor come to some sort of an agreement. I think we should probably accept that as practically what is going to happen or what is happening in the practical world. You may want to show the minimum scale of fees recommended by ICAI to the client. He's going to be very happy that you showed it to him, but it doesn't mean that he's going to pay you that amount of money. This definitely, he'll be very happy. He'll say, okay, fine, this is nice to know, but I mean, why are you putting it on me? Put it on somebody else, That sort of a thing he's going to probably say here. As I said, on an average, the response is generally been that we will not be able to charge. We will not be able to charge what the recommended scale of fees by ICAI is. Now, that is obviously only recommendation. There's no, even the ICAI is mentioned as a recommendation. If you are able to get it, nothing like it. But if you are not, there is no this thing here. The only issue which comes up here is that if this becomes a point for me in the AQMM model, then I have a problem, because unnecessarily I'm going to lose a point. In the practical world, going and showing the client the recommended scale of fees and agreeing for a particular fee, that's a different ballgame altogether. But just because I'm not charging the minimum scale of fees of ICAI, losing 1 point in the AQMM model, I think, is a little bit unfair on the chartered accountants, because we know for a fact that in the real practical world, this is only a recommendation. We may not be able to charge for a vast majority of our clients as per the minimum scale. I think the way the ICA should probably fix this problem is that they should say that they should give, just like how they give the negative marking, they should try to tell us that, okay, how many cases of yours are going to be below the benchmark? How many are going to be above the benchmark? Give some sort of a criteria. Don't just give yes or no and 1 or 0 points, because we are practically not going to be able to do this on this thing here, real scale here. I just thought I'd show this to all of you all. You can just see here that we are talking about audit quality maturity model, but you look at the response given by the ICA, they have said that the last column is maximum number of points. The maximum number of points should actually be 2 points, but they have mentioned only 1 point. So to that extent, the model itself has got a mistake in it. So audit quality maturity model having a mistake doesn't sound so good for us, but the actual thing is that it should actually be 2 there, not 1, because that is what they're trying to say here. Okay, what happens now at the end of all this? Section 1 reference, section 1, practice management operation, 80 points. Section 2 HR, 50 points. Section 3 practice credentials, 20 points. 20 maximum number of points possible are 20, 80, 50 and 20. I already mentioned this to you. So for many of the participants who think that, okay, 150, no, 50% pass mark. So 75 if I get, I'm okay. Maybe I should probably try to get 70, make maximum section 1 only. Your thinking is correct. You should make maximum section only, but not necessarily only in section 1, because the AQMM model is trying to focus on all the 3 sections. They're trying to focus on all the 3 sections and saying that in case you are up to 30% in each section, you are in rating category number 1. If you are 30 to 60%, your rating category is 2. And if you are above 60%, your category is 3. 30%, your category 1 means that you are very nascent, which means that you have to do a lot of work. A lot of work needs to be done for you to get that audit quality. Rating 2 means that, okay, not so bad, you are okay, but still a lot of improvement is required. Still scope for improvement is there. You look at rating 3. Rating 3, they are saying that you have made a significant adoption of standards and procedures, but even then they are not satisfied. You will have to optimize further, they are saying. Up to 30%. So one of the takeaways from this AQM model is that don't assess on total 150 points. Total, you assess on a section-wise basis. PMO, practice management operation, section 1, assess that separately. HR, assess separately. And the third is credentials, assess separately. Mark yourself separately in each of these areas. And look at this rating now. 30% means 1, 30 or 60% means 2, above 60% means 3. Where are we now? Probably level 1 should move towards level 2, and level 3 should be achieved in 3 or 4 years time. I've just put this as a sort of a thumb, sort of a a general point just for the purpose of discussion, because most of us, many of these points are new. Please remember that many of these categories or many of these criteria are new for us. And we will probably be in level 1. Some firms may probably be in the level 2 or rating 2, shall I say, rating 2. Rating 3 may be very rare, but rating 1 and 2 definitely yes, right? So we should move towards level 2, and then we should probably get to level 3 in about 3 or 4 years time. In 3 or 4 years time, it is possible that AQMM may be applicable to a small and medium enterprise also. It is possible that the AQMM may be applicable to small and medium practitioners also. So in that particular case, it becomes important for us to understand that this is a journey we are starting, and we will start right now. As we move along, we will take whatever comes in our way and try to achieve that level 3 or rating 3 in about 3 or 4 years time. What are the clarifications which are needed? Of course, we need a clarification on that question which I asked you about 1 or 2 points also, but a few other questions definitely do arise. How frequently should we do the AQM? Because this is a self-marking mechanism, should I do it every year? Should I do it at the end of 2 years? As we are speaking today, there's absolutely no clarity on when this is to be done. But as many participants will probably agree on seeing this model, this requires some effort. Doing it every year is not going to be practical for a normal practicing chartered accountant with his routine duties. So maybe once in 2 or 3 years may make some sense, because we get some sort of a breathing time for that particular assessment to be done. Or maybe they can link it to the peer review also. I do not know. That also is a possible suggestion. But this question definitely has to be answered. How frequently should the AQM be done? And I would believe that it should not be done at least, it should not be done annually at least. The second question which we have to answer is that, will there be a counter check? Now again, please don't get me wrong here. The ICAI also is not going to doubt the capabilities of chartered accountants in the self-marking mechanism. But will the peer reviewer who comes to our office ask this question, that on what basis have you put 1 point there? Can I see some more documents for this? Will there be a counter check is a very important question to answer, because we are doing self-marking and somebody should not come and tell me that your marking is wrong or it needs to be improved. So I think that also requires a lot of clarification on the part of the ICAI. And the third and probably the most important question which will trouble many of the small and medium enterprises and chartered accountants in practice is going to be that, I have done my assessment. I'm right now in rating 1 category. I give it to the ICAI. I send it to the ICAI because they want this on a year-on-year basis. I send it to them. Where are these ratings going to be used? Meaning to say, will the ICAI share this with, say for example, MCA for government audits? Will they share it with the RBI for bank audits, IRDA for insurance audits, SEBI for listed companies? Is this going to be a document which is going to be circulated whenever asked for, not in public domain, but whenever, say for example, suppose RBI does ask the ICAI, can you give me a list of all the rating 3 firms in Coimbatore? Do you have a list of all the 3 rating firms in Coimbatore? It means rating 3 means the best quality or highest quality. Will the ICAI give this information out to them? Linked to this question is the fact that if they give this information to the RBI, will the firm be informed about this? We should remember here that the certification or the self-marking mechanism is being done by the firm or an individual in the particular firm. If it is going to be used in the public domain or going to be used for the purpose of allotment of audits and work and all, the firm would definitely have to be informed about it. But of course, having said that, I'll also probably say that these are early days right now. The model is still to come out, as I've seen. But I would think that when the next version of the model is released by the ICAI, they should cover these points also. The model per se, okay, with the give or take a few improvements, is fine by itself. It's fine by itself. But when the model is actually implemented, these questions would need to be answered, because it would definitely worry many chartered accountants if the ICAI gives the information to other bodies without the knowledge of the chartered accountant, because the honest question you're going to answer, they ask them is that, okay, if I know that, I would have probably improved my rating in a true and proper manner, instead of just trying to, give it for the purpose of giving it. So I think this is a very important task which the ICAI has to do. They would need to give us a time frame, number one. And they would also need to tell us whether somebody else can come and question our judgment on what marking we have done. And they definitely need to clarify to us where these ratings will be used. It's going to be an official thing for, say, for example, the MEF form. If it's going to be an official thing for that, then again, we need to be informed about it. And finally, for the SME practitioners, I have also emphasized this earlier also, but I will repeat it here. There is a limited applicability. We know that. We may not come to many of these, we may not have many of the clients or listed companies who are falling into this particular category. It's always preferable to commence this journey. You need not worry about HR, need not worry about too much of technology adoption right now. The starting point, you can always make a starting point by having an extremely effective checklist manual audit documentation. You all can make a beginning in that area, because that is the core of the audit practice, number one. And second, it also gives you a lot of points or a lot of marks in the AQMM model. You all can focus in that area. Don't worry about, as I said, you cannot do everything overnight. It has to be incremental only. You commence by focusing on these audit manuals, checklists, and audit documentation. You just have to pick up what is there and try to see what and all additions you all can make, what and all improvements you all can make, what should go into that audit file as an additional thing. There are models of audit documentation available online also. You can use that and try to benchmark that and see what is to be done here, so that the one is not only is the beginning being made, but you also have a basis on which you're going towards this AQMM model. So I will repeat what I said earlier when I commenced this presentation also. This is not a criticism. This is not a guidance note. This is not an auditing standard. It is not mandatory as of now. It will be in some time. But though recommendatory in nature, I think the message I want to convey to all of you all is that, considering the present environment we are in, everybody is looking at auditors with a little bit of a very closed manner today. I would obviously think that it is better to ensure this documentation, all these things here, in such a manner that we're able to defend the audit. Now, the other parts of the AQMM, the technology piece and all the HR piece and all, will come later on. That will come later on. But once you start this, I think the main core areas of practice management operation can start. Another good way to do it would also be that, do I have to start all three simultaneously? Because I think the last part will actually not require much effort to be done. Most of you have probably done this already. But the first part, those incremental changes I told you about, that becomes very, very important. Don't start only PMO today and then go to HR, and then that will take a lot of time. My suggestion is do everything together, so that you all are able to at least get into this journey and start this particular process of this. With this, I think I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for a very patient hearing. Thank you, Maheshwaran sir. And if required, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take those questions. Thank you very much, sir.
So actually, as you said, thank you, sir. There are no questions.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we'll go through the questions, sir.
No, so there are no questions actually. Many were asking for PPT, and the response from the audience is that since you covered everything extensively along with the questionnaire, there are no questions actually. A response from the audience also. So
yeah,
okay, I was your question, you have covered everything on this, it seems so, sir. I'm not
okay, thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for taking about 2 hours with the same tempo, though it's somewhat, so to say, a boring subject. You have maintained the tempo. That's very nice, sir. Because as you could see, more than 270 were always present. I was just watching. That's a great achievement, and it was just a literal walkthrough of the entire audit process and the life of a chartered accountant almost. As you just, the last words are very important. Let us just make a beginning in the audit process and all. That will help a long way. I think most of the participants would have got the message right. As you know, the expectation can't do anything. It's increasing day by day. I think now we all these kind of shield, or rather something like an insurance to
Correct.
the same thing.
I mean,
Please,
to the
sir.
participants, I'll send the presentation. The presentation, Amsterdam, along with the Excel sheet also. I've got to send that also.
That Excel sheet. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Then you all can go for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Once again, thank you. Right, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.